Have you ever looked at someone and thought you knew their whole story? Judged them by the creases in their uniform, the weariness in their eyes, or the job they were paid to do? Have you ever assumed their silence was weakness, or their service was servitude? We draw these lines in the sand, between the person serving and the person being served, between the one we see and the one we think we know. But what if those lines were not just wrong, but a map of our own ignorance? What if the person you dismissed as a nobody was, in fact, the one person who held your entire world in their hands? This is a story about those lines, and about a woman who didn't just cross them, but erased them completely. Her name was Alara, and she worked as a waitress at the Gilded Spoon, a restaurant that glittered on the surface but was slowly rotting from within. She moved through the maze of tables with a quiet grace that was often mistaken for invisibility. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight, simple bun, and her uniform was always immaculate, a stark contrast to the exhaustion that sometimes flickered in her deep, observant eyes. She was a ghost in the machine of fine dining, refilling water glasses before they were empty, clearing plates the moment a fork was set down, her presence felt but rarely acknowledged. For the patrons of the Gilded Spoon, she was part of the decor, a functional object in a world of luxury. But Alara was not an object. She was a student, a researcher, and a judge, hiding in plain sight. Every quiet nod, every polite "excuse me," every moment she spent wiping down a sticky table was an act of data collection. She saw the stress fractures in the restaurant's foundation that the owner, in his glass-walled office, could not. She saw the simmering resentment among the kitchen staff, the forced smiles of her fellow servers, and the arrogant entitlement of the customers who believed their money bought them the right to be cruel. One Tuesday evening, the brass and mahogany door of the Gilded Spoon swung open, admitting a blast of cold city air, and a wave of shrill, confident laughter. Chloe Sterling and her two friends, Amber and Jessica, swept in as if they owned the very air inside. Chloe was the sun around which her lesser planets orbited, a young woman sculpted by inherited wealth and polished by a lifetime of getting her way. Her dress was a sliver of crimson silk that likely cost more than Alara's monthly rent, and her blonde hair fell in a cascade of perfect, expensive waves. She surveyed the room not with appreciation, but with the bored gaze of a queen inspecting a territory she already conquered. They were seated in Alara's section. From the moment they sat down, the performance began. Chloe snapped her fingers to get Alara's attention, a sound that cracked through the low hum of conversation like a whip. Water. Sparkling. With lemon, 3 slices, not 2, not 4. And don't let me see the bottom of the glass. Her voice was high and clear, designed to carry, to announce her own importance. Alara simply nodded, her expression unreadable. Of course, she said, her own voice low and steady, a calm river against Chloe's jagged rocks. She returned with the water precisely as requested. Chloe picked up the glass, inspected the lemon slices with theatrical scrutiny, and then, with a flick of her wrist, accidentally, sloshed a significant amount of water onto the pristine white tablecloth. "Oh, clumsy me," she said, her eyes, cold and blue, locking onto Alara's. "Or was it you? You were a little shaky setting it down," her friends giggled, a sycophantic chorus. It was a test, a classic power play. Alara didn't flinch. She retrieved a fresh napkin from her apron and began to expertly blot the spill, her movements efficient and devoid of emotion. "My apologies," she murmured, though it was clear to anyone watching where the fault lay. "I'll replace the setting for you immediately." Her dignity was a shield, and it only served to infuriate Chloe further. The young heiress wanted a reaction. She wanted tears or anger or fumbling panic. What she got was quiet competence, a mirror that reflected only her own ugliness back at her. The battle had been joined, but only one of them knew it was a war. From his small, elevated office overlooking the dining room, Alastair Finch watched the scene unfold with a familiar knot of acid tightening in his stomach. Alastair was a man drowning in tailored suits. He had inherited the Gilded Spoon from his father, a culinary legend who had built the establishment on principles of respect and excellence. But Alastair was not his father. He was a businessman, and the business was failing. The weight of his father's legacy and the restaurant's mounting debts pressed down on him, aging him beyond his 45 years. He saw Chloe Sterling's entitled charade, and felt a surge of impotent rage. He knew her type well. They were a virus infecting his dining room with their casual cruelty, driving away good customers and demoralizing his staff. Yet he felt powerless. A bad online review from a Sterling could be catastrophic. He needed every customer, even the terrible ones. His gaze shifted to Alara. He'd noticed her before. In an environment where most staff were either frantically stressed or cynically checked out, she was an island of calm. She was methodical, precise, and possessed a stillness that was almost unnerving. He'd seen her handle difficult customers before, always with that same impenetrable grace. He admired it, but he also worried it made her a target. He watched as she returned with a new place setting, her movements economical and smooth, her face a mask of professional neutrality. He saw Chloe lean in and whisper something to her friends, followed by another round of cruel laughter. Alistair's jaw tightened. He should go down there. He should intervene, defend his employee, and tell Ms. Sterling that her money didn't give her the right to behave like a tyrant. But fear, cold and pragmatic, held him in his chair. He was negotiating with a potential investor, an anonymous entity that communicated only through a stern, uncompromising law firm. The deal was his last hope. The investor was asking for detailed reports on everything from profit margins to staff turnover and customer satisfaction metrics. Any disruption, any public scene, could sink the whole deal. So he sat, a prisoner in his own office, and watched. Meanwhile, Alara was not just enduring the abuse, she was cataloging it. This was not the first time she had worn a uniform to understand a system from the ground up. Before the Gilded Spoon, it was a smock in a warehouse, a hard hat on a construction site, a headset in a call center. She had built a small fortune from a combination of a modest inheritance from her grandmother, a woman who had worked as a seamstress her entire life, and a series of daring, intelligent investments in undervalued companies. Her strategy was simple: she invested in people. She believed that the health of any business could be measured by how it treated its lowest-paid employees. A company that fostered dignity and respect on its front lines was a company built to last. The Gilded Spoon, with its storied reputation and its current financial distress, was a perfect candidate. She had taken the waitress job under an assumed surname to see the truth for herself, before committing a single dollar. And tonight, Chloe Sterling was providing a masterclass in the restaurant's most glaring weakness. It wasn't the food, which was excellent. It wasn't the decor, which was beautiful. It was the culture. A culture that allowed the powerful to prey on the powerless, unchecked. As she placed a fresh linen napkin on the table, she made a mental note. Management fails to protect staff from customer harassment. Creates a high-stress, low-morale environment. Significant operational risk. Chloe's smug smile was not just an insult, it was a data point. The meal progressed like a slow-motion car crash. Chloe complained that her steak, ordered medium rare, was a shade too pink. She sent it back. When it returned, she declared it was now overcooked and pushed it away with a sigh of dramatic suffering. She found a microscopic speck on her wine glass and demanded a new one, implying it was a sign of the restaurant's declining standards. Each complaint was delivered directly to Alara, her voice dripping with condescension, her words chosen to demean. "Can you even understand the difference? Or is this as good as it gets here?" she'd ask, not waiting for an answer. Alara absorbed each barb with the same unnerving placidity. She simply nodded, apologized for the supposed error, and corrected it without fuss. Her refusal to be baited was driving Chloe to a quiet fury. Finally, Chloe decided to escalate. She waved over the floor manager, Marcus, a man whose ambition far outstripped his integrity. Marcus was a corporate creature, all polished shoes and a practiced, insincere smile. He lived by one rule: the wealthy customer is always right. "Is there a problem, Ms. Sterling?" he asked, his voice oozing deference. Chloe pointed a perfectly manicured finger at Alara. "This waitress," she said, infusing the word with as much contempt as possible, has been incredibly rude and incompetent all evening. The service has been appalling. My meal was ruined. I feel completely unwelcome." Marcus's smile tightened. He shot a venomous glare at Alara. He didn't ask for her side of the story. He didn't need it. In his mind, the equation was simple. Chloe Sterling's family had a net worth in the 9-figure range. Alara earned $9 an hour plus tips. The verdict was preordained. "I am so terribly sorry, Ms. Sterling," he said, turning back to Chloe. "This is completely unacceptable. Please, your entire meal is on the house, of course. And I will deal with her personally." He then turned to Alara, his voice dropping to a harsh, menacing whisper. "My office." Now from his perch, Alistair watched the exchange, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. He saw Marcus's spineless capitulation, his immediate betrayal of his own staff member. This was the rot. This was the problem. A manager who managed nothing but his own career prospects, who would sacrifice anyone to appease a bully with a big bank account. He saw Alara's shoulders, for the first time that night, seem to droop ever so slightly as she followed Marcus toward the back of the restaurant. He felt a pang of guilt so sharp it was like a physical blow. He was the owner. This was his house. And he was letting the wolves devour his sheep. He thought of the anonymous investor. The latest email from their lawyer had been particularly sharp, questioning the high rate of staff turnover in the past year. A revolving door in your service staff suggests a fundamental issue with management or work environment. Please provide a detailed explanation and a plan for remediation, the email had read. Alistair had no good explanation. The truth was people like Marcus were the explanation. And Alistair had let it happen. He watched Chloe preen in her victory, accepting the fawning apologies from Marcus as her due. He knew with a sudden, sickening certainty that he had to do something. The risk to the investment deal no longer seemed as important as the risk to his own soul. Inside the cramped, windowless office, Marcus unleashed his frustration. "What is wrong with you?" he hissed, his face inches from Alara's. "Do you have any idea who that is?" "That's Chloe Sterling. Her father is one of the most powerful men in this city. All she has to do is make one phone call, write one bad review, and we're toast. And you decide to play games with her." Alara stood perfectly still, her hands clasped behind her back. Her gaze was level, her expression calm. "I did my job, Marcus," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I did exactly as she asked. I was polite and professional. Marcus scoffed, throwing his hands up in the air. "You were supposed to make her happy. You grovel, you scrape, you apologize for the air she breathes if you have to. That's the job. You don't stand there like a statue and make her feel like she's the one in the wrong." He paced the small room like a caged animal. "I should fire you. Right now. One more complaint, and you are out of here. Do you understand me?" "You are on thin ice." Alara simply looked at him, and in her eyes, there was not fear, but a flicker of something else, pity. She saw a man so terrified of losing his small perch of authority that he had surrendered all his principles. He was a hollow shell, echoing the demands of those he perceived as more powerful. "I understand," she said, the words carrying a weight he couldn't possibly comprehend. She understood the system perfectly. She understood his weakness, his fear, and his role in the restaurant's slow decay. She understood that he was not a leader, but a gatekeeper, and the gate he was guarding was already crumbling. As she walked back out into the dining room, her resolve hardened. Her investment was no longer just about financial returns. It had become a mission. She wasn't just going to buy into this restaurant, she was going to save it from itself. Back at the table, Chloe was basking in the glow of her triumph. The complimentary champagne had arrived, and she was recounting the tale of her victory to her enraptured friends. "You see," she said, taking a delicate sip. "You just have to be firm with these people. They need to be reminded of their place." But as Alara approached the table to clear the last of their plates, Chloe decided one final act of humiliation was in order. As Alara reached for her dessert plate, Chloe let out a sharp, theatrical gasp. "My earring," she cried out, her voice filled with panic. "My diamond earring. It's gone." She began to frantically search the table, her friends joining in the performance. "It was a gift from my father. It's worth thousands." Then, her eyes, gleaming with malicious intent, fell on the half-eaten slice of cheesecake on the plate in Alara's hand. With a swift movement, she grabbed the plate, dug her fork into it, and lifted it up. There, nestled in the cream cheese, was a small, glittering diamond stud. It had obviously been planted. "There!" Chloe shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Alara. "She did it. The waitress. She must have dropped it in there when she was in the kitchen. Or maybe she was trying to steal it. She's a thief." The accusation hung in the air, thick and poisonous. The entire restaurant went silent. Every eye turned to their table, to the rich girl crying theft and the silent waitress holding the incriminating dessert. Marcus came rushing back, his face pale with horror. This was it. The ultimate catastrophe. "She's a thief," Chloe repeated, her voice rising with manufactured hysteria. "I want her arrested. I want her fired." Marcus looked from Chloe's furious face to Alara's calm one. He saw the earring, the shocked faces of the other diners, and the impending doom of his career. He made his choice. "You're fired," he spat at Alara, his voice shaking with rage and fear. "Get your things and get out. Now." "That's enough." The voice was not loud, but it cut through the tension-filled dining room with the authority of a judge's gavel. Alistair Finch stood by the table, his face a mask of cold fury. He had finally descended from his office, his fear replaced by a resolve so absolute it was palpable. He looked not at Chloe, but at his manager. "Marcus," he said, his voice dangerously low. "You will do nothing. You will not fire this employee." Marcus stared at him, dumbfounded. "But, sir. Ms. Sterling." "The earring, I saw the whole thing, Marcus," Alistair said, his gaze sweeping over the scene. "I saw Ms. Sterling's behavior all evening. And I find her current accusation highly suspect." Chloe let out an indignant scoff. "Suspect? Are you calling me a liar? Do you have any idea who I am? My father will hear about this. He'll ruin you. This pathetic little restaurant will be a parking lot by next year." Alistair finally turned his eyes to her, and for the first time, Chloe saw not a timid proprietor, but a man who had reached his breaking point. "I am well aware of who you are, Ms. Sterling," he said calmly. "But what you seem to be unaware of is that in my restaurant, under my roof, character is worth more than a family name." It was at that moment that Alistair's phone, sitting on the host's stand where he'd left it, buzzed with an incoming email. The subject line was from the law firm. It read, "Decision today. Our client is on site." A cold dread and a strange sense of liberation washed over him simultaneously. It was all coming to a head, right here, right now. Before he could process it, Alara moved. She did not look defeated. She did not look scared. She looked ready. She set the plate down gently, pulled her phone from her apron pocket, and made a short, quiet call. Her back was to the room, so no one could hear what she said. A few seconds later, the main door of the Gilded Spoon opened again. A distinguished, gray-haired man in an impeccably tailored suit walked in. He carried a leather portfolio, and his eyes scanned the room with a lawyer's precision. He walked past Chloe's table without a glance. He walked past the stunned Marcus. He walked straight past Alistair Finch. He stopped directly in front of the waitress. "Ms. Vance," the man said, his voice respectful and clear, holding out the portfolio. "As requested. The final paperwork for your review and signature." Silence. A deep, profound, and absolute silence fell over the Gilded Spoon. Vance. Not the simple name on her application. Chloe's face, which had been twisted in a mask of righteous fury, seemed to crumble. The color drained from it, leaving behind a waxy, sickly pale. Marcus's jaw hung open, a comical picture of disbelief and horror. Alistair stared, his mind struggling to connect the dots. The waitress, Ilara, was Ms. Vance. The anonymous, demanding, multimillionaire investor he had been courting for months. Ilara took the portfolio from the lawyer, Mr. Davies. She didn't open it. Instead, she turned to face Alistair, her eyes meeting his. For the first time, he saw past the waitress's uniform and saw the woman herself, her intelligence, her strength, her profound stillness. "Hello, Mr. Finch," she said, her voice the same calm, steady tone she'd used all night. "My name is Ilara Vance. I've been considering a significant investment in your restaurant," she gestured around the silent room. "I believe in immersive due diligence. I find you learn more by working the floor than you ever can from a balance sheet." Ilara's gaze was unwavering as she addressed Alistair, but her words were for the entire room to hear. "I came here because I saw potential. A beautiful space, a talented kitchen, and a legacy worth preserving. But a business is not just its assets, Mr. Finch. It's a living organism. And the lifeblood of that organism is its people and its culture." She took a step closer to him, her voice resonating with a power no one in that room had ever heard from her. "I have spent the last 3 weeks watching, listening, and learning. I've seen dedicated staff pushed to their breaking point. I've seen management that prizes appeasement over integrity. And tonight," her eyes flickered for a moment toward Chloe, "I have seen a culture that allows contempt and cruelty to be served as a side dish." She then turned her full attention to the young woman who had tormented her. Chloe flinched as if struck. "Ms. Sterling," Ilara began, her tone now cold and sharp as surgical steel. "You came in here tonight, and you judged me by my uniform. You assumed my purpose was to bend to your will. You spilled water and pretended it was an accident. You sent back perfectly good food to make a point. You belittled my intelligence and my competence. And then, in a final, pathetic display of power, you planted your own earring in a piece of cake and accused me of being a thief." She let each accusation land, each word a stone cast into the silent pool of the dining room. Chloe began to tremble, her face a mess of confusion and terror. The world she had known, a world that bent to her whims, was shattering around her. "You did all of this," Ilara continued, "because you believe your wealth gives you a license to be unkind. You believe that people who serve you are beneath you. You are the rot I was looking for, Ms. Sterling. You are the symptom of the disease that is killing this restaurant, the belief that a person's worth is tied to their bank balance." Chloe finally broke. A choked sob escaped her lips. I'm sorry," she stammered, the words sounding alien in her mouth. "I didn't know." "I didn't mean you didn't know what." Ilara cut her off, her voice devoid of sympathy. "That the waitress you were torturing for sport had the power to affect your life. That's not an apology for your behavior. That's just fear of the consequences. Your apology is meaningless because it is offered to the investor, not to the waitress." Humiliated, terrified, Chloe stared at the woman she had tried to crush, now realizing she was the one who was insignificant. Her friends, Amber and Jessica, were frozen in their chairs, looking at Chloe as if she were a stranger, their loyalty evaporating in the face of this terrifying new reality. Ilara turned back to Alistair, who was still trying to process the seismic shift that had just occurred. "So, Mr. Finch," she said, her voice softening slightly. "I will invest. I will save the gilded spoon. But not as it is. We will rebuild it. And my investment comes with conditions. Non-negotiable conditions." Alistair looked at Ilara Vance, truly seeing her for the first time. He saw not just an investor but a leader. The hope he had been desperately searching for had been standing in front of him all along, wearing an apron and carrying a tray. "Anything," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Whatever you ask first," Ilara said, her gaze shifting to Marcus, who looked as if he was about to be physically ill. "He is fired. Effective immediately." A leader who will not defend his people is not a leader, he is a liability. He has proven he lacks the character to be part of what we are about to build. Marcus opened his mouth to protest, to beg, but a single, sharp look from Alara silenced him. He knew it was over. He turned and shuffled away, a man who had just lost everything because he stood for nothing. Second, Alara continued, we are closing the restaurant for 1 week. During that week, every single member of staff, from the dishwashers to you, Mr. Finch, will participate in a new training program. We will redefine service. It will be built on a foundation of mutual respect. Our staff will be trained to be professional, warm, and courteous. And our customers will be expected to be the same. We will have a zero-tolerance policy for abuse, regardless of who the customer is. This will be a place of dignity. Alistair nodded enthusiastically. It was everything his father had believed in, everything he had forgotten how to fight for. Third, Alara said, her voice filled with conviction, 10% of the restaurant's profits will be placed into a staff fund. This fund will be used for professional development, emergency assistance, and annual bonuses. We will invest in our people, because they are our most valuable asset. They are the heart of the Gilded Spoon. Alistair felt a weight lift from his shoulders that had been there for years. This wasn't just a financial bailout, it was a moral one. Yes, he said, a genuine smile spreading across his face for the first time, in what felt like an eternity. Yes, Ms. Vance. To all of it, with the terms laid out, Alara finally turned her attention back to the weeping figure of Chloe Sterling. The girl was a wreck, her makeup running in dark streaks down her pale face. Her friends had already paid the bill in cash and scurried away, abandoning her to face the music alone. Please, Chloe whispered, her voice barely audible. Please don't tell my father. His company. We have partners. If they hear about this, it would ruin him. It would ruin me. Please have mercy. Alara looked at her for a long, silent moment. The entire dining room waited, holding its breath. They expected a final, crushing blow. They expected vengeance. But Alara had not come here for revenge. She had come here to build something better. Mercy is not a commodity you can beg for, Chloe, she said, her voice quiet but firm. It's not something I can give you to make this go away. It has to be earned. Your father's business has nothing to do with me. Your reputation is your own to build or destroy. You have done a fine job of destroying it tonight. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Your apology will be your actions from this day forward. Your penance will be how you treat the next person who pours your water, the next person who cleans your hotel room, the next person who you think is beneath you. You want mercy? Go out into the world and create it for someone else. I won't be telling your father. But I will be watching. The world is smaller than you think. Now get out of my restaurant. Chloe stumbled to her feet, her arrogance and pride stripped away, leaving only a raw, shivering humiliation. Without another word, she fled into the night, not as a conquering queen, but as a ghost. Months passed. The Gilded Spoon reopened, and it was transformed. The name was the same, but the soul of the place was entirely new. The oppressive tension was gone, replaced by a vibrant, welcoming energy. The staff moved with a newfound confidence and pride. They smiled genuine smiles. They were partners in the restaurant's success, not just cogs in its machine. The training program Alara had implemented had been a revolution. It taught the staff not just how to serve, but how to lead, how to de-escalate conflict with dignity, and how to feel empowered in their roles. Alistair Finch was a changed man. He was no longer hiding in his office, crushed by spreadsheets and fear. He was on the floor, talking to his staff, greeting guests, his face filled with the passion he thought he had lost forever. He and Alara were a formidable team. She brought the vision and the capital, he brought the operational experience and a renewed connection to his father's legacy. The restaurant was more successful than ever before. It became known not just for its exquisite food, but for its extraordinary atmosphere of warmth and respect. It was the hardest reservation to get in the city, not because of exclusivity, but because of its humanity. One brisk autumn afternoon, Elara was walking through a less affluent part of the city, checking on another one of her boots-on-the-ground investments, a community-run kitchen that provided meals for the homeless. As she rounded a corner, she saw a familiar figure. It was Chloe Sterling. She wasn't wearing silk or diamonds. She was wearing a plain apron, her expensive hair tied back in a simple ponytail. She was standing behind a counter, ladling soup into a bowl for a man whose clothes were tattered and worn. She looked up and saw the man smile at her, a gap-toothed, grateful smile. And Chloe smiled back. It was not a smug or performative smile. It was small and a little sad, but it was genuine. Their eyes met for a fleeting second across the crowded room. There was no conversation. No words were needed. Elara saw a flicker of recognition in Chloe's eyes, followed by a wave of shame, and then, something else, acceptance. Chloe quickly looked down, back to her work, her hands a little unsteady. Elara simply nodded to herself, a quiet acknowledgement, and continued on her way. The apology was being made. Not in words but in actions. Mercy was being earned, one bowl of soup at a time. The world had not gotten smaller, Chloe's perspective had simply gotten bigger. We all wear a uniform of some kind. For some, it's an apron or a hard hat. For others, it's a power suit or a designer dress. We use these costumes to signal our tribe, our status, our place in the world. But beneath every uniform, there is a human heart, a personal story, and a value that cannot be printed on a price tag. Elara Vance knew this. She knew that true worth is not measured by what you have, but by what you give. It's not found in a bank statement but in your character. It's not about the power you wield over others, but the dignity you afford to everyone, regardless of their station. The story of the Gilded Spoon is not just about a waitress who turned out to be an investor. It's a story about seeing beyond the surface. It's a reminder that the person you overlook could be the one holding the key to your future. It's a testament to the fact that a single person, armed with integrity and a clear vision, can rebuild a broken world and make it better, stronger, and more humane. So the next time you step out into the world, look closer. Look past the uniform and see the person. Acknowledge their humanity. Offer them the same respect you hope to receive. You never know whose life you might change. And you never know when the person serving you your coffee might just own the whole building. Share this story if you believe that dignity is not for sale, and that everyone, in every job, deserves our respect. And in the comments below, tell us about a time someone surprised you by showing their hidden strength. Let's remind each other that true power lies in kindness.